it's Rebecca with Beck's Fine Art. Welcome back. For today's episode, I'm going to show you how to mix up some resin. I know, super simple, right? But a lot of times when you're starting out with resin, all you have to go by is the directions in the box. And I know for me, I was not totally sure of what I was doing, even though yes, I can read and I was reading the directions. It's nice, I think, to have a visual step-by-step for it, so that's why I decided to create this video. That way, if you just bought some resin, you're not sure what you're doing, you can put this video on and know that you're doing it correctly. And all the supplies I'm using are really easy to pick up. You don't have to order any online. They're not necessarily the professional supplies, and they're all really inexpensive. So let's get started. All right, so here are the two bottles that I'm adding another layer of resin to. This one had a spot that hadn't cured all the way, and if it doesn't cure all the way, then it's not going to, so I need to put another layer over the whole thing. And this one actually got damaged in shipping, so I'm repairing it for a customer. So you can see it got a little chipped right there. So I'm gonna do 2 layers over it, one to kind of seal this and fix it, and then one where I can paint over that to fix the details, so that way you won't be able to notice that it's chipped, and then the resin will go over that layer of paint. So this is the resin that I always use, Countertop Epoxy, Premium FX Epoxy. It's definitely my favorite. And I'm going to show you an easy way to measure your resin in case you don't have little measuring cups. It's super easy. All right, so for measuring out the resin, what I'm going to do is put a line on my popsicle stick to help me measure it inside of the Dixie cup. That way I can make sure that both parts of the resin are measured equally, because if you don't measure equal parts and you mix it up, then your resin won't cure properly. Most likely what will happen is it won't cure all the way, and you'll end up with kind of like a sticky or a tacky surface, which we don't want. Unfortunately, in the beginning, when you're starting out with resin, you kind of just have to experiment a little to see how much you actually need. Most resin brands will tell you to mix way more than you actually need, so it's my opinion that you always start with less, and then you can always mix up another batch, versus if you mix up way too much, then you end up wasting a whole bunch, and resin is expensive, so it ends up wasting money. So this is kind of like the best formula for that. So since I've been doing resin for a while, I know how much I'll need to cover 2 tumblers with Dixie Cup. So once both parts are mixed up, I want it to be about here. So I'm going to be very scientific and mathematical and roughly divide that in half. So about there is where I want one part to be. So then what I'm going to do is line up my popsicle stick against my Dixie cup and then make a line across it. So when I fill up the Dixie cup, what I'll do is I will place the popsicle stick inside of it, fill the resin up to that line for both parts, and then I'll be able to combine it and know that they've both been equally measured. So here is one part, and I'm just going to put it in the middle, standing it up. Try to let it even out and set before you continue pouring. Perfect. So you can see I filled it right up to the line. I just need to wipe off the rim. And I'll go ahead and measure out the second one. This is going to be the part that's a little bit thicker. So you definitely want to make sure that you let that even out across the bottom. Especially because it's a little bit cooler, so it's going to be a little bit slower to come out of the resin bottle and kind of even out. Maybe just a little bit more. Alright, that looks right at the line. Just a tiny bit more. There we go. All right, so now all we have to do is mix it. So here are the 2 parts right next to each other. They are pretty much even. If it's slightly off, it's really not that big of a deal. You just don't want it to be like noticeably off. So what I think is easiest is to take the part that's a little bit more flowy and liquidy and pour that into the part that's a little bit thicker, just because it's easier to make sure you get all of this off the edges of your Dixie cup. The other one tends to stick a little bit more, and like I said, we want this to be as even as possible. So really get those edges, scrape them off, try to get as much as you can off the bottom. Now this is like the downside of using Dixie cups. If you were to use measuring cups, then you know you can just kind of go off the numbers on that. So if you need it to be up to 8 ounces, then you know, okay, the first part's going to go up to 4, and then the second part's going to bring it up to 8. So that does make it a little bit easier, but this is just what I have ended up doing. All right, so now all that we have left to do is mix it. So what you're going to want to do is mix for 1.5 minutes in one direction and then 1.5 minutes in the other direction. And try to make sure when you're mixing it that you're doing it nice and evenly. The faster you go, the more bubbles that you are going to create, especially if it's cooler where you're located and where you're doing this. And then since, if you're like me, you pour the more liquidy part inside the thicker part, make sure that you're really scraping those edges to make sure that the thicker part is mixing. I also like to wipe off the popsicle stick just to make sure that that isn't going to contribute to the resin getting messed up at all. Alright everyone, I hope you found this video helpful if this is your first time mixing resin, or maybe you just wanted some different directions or tips on how I mix my resin. If you have any additional questions, please leave those in the comments and I will gladly answer them. And then make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.